Welcome back to Paths to Fortunes, the podcast where we explore the many paths available to you to create a fortune. And together, we'll teach the next generations how to grow their wealth too. Whether you're here to learn about building a fortune through investing in real estate, teaching your kids good financial habits, creating a financial legacy, or saving money, you are in the right place. Out of all the possible wealth-building paths out there, I've had the most success with owning rental properties. I've been successful because I use systems and data to make the right decisions. One of the biggest decisions I consistently made was analyzing where to look for the properties to buy. One of the most frequently asked questions I get is, in what city should I buy a rental property? So today, I'm breaking down how you can answer that question for your path. And I'll give you examples of 5 cities that meet certain criteria that you might be looking to find. Not all markets are created equal. Some have high appreciation and some have solid cash flow. I'll walk you through exactly how I research cities for investing, and then you can see if your city stacks up. Here's how you can narrow down your search for a rental property to a specific zip code using a series of filters in a specific order. Whether you want to buy your 15th rental house or your first, you can use my filter system. First, look at a map and see which states that are affordable are closest to you. If you can drive there to look at a property and handle problems, you'll save time and money on travel in the long run. A Google search for which states have the most affordable homes will show you that it's clearly the Midwest and the Southeast states of the United States that have the most affordable homes. Out of those affordable states, choose the one that is closest to where you live. Eliminate areas of those states that are likely to have high insurance costs, places that are more likely to experience floods, hurricanes, or fires. Then look for affordable small to medium-sized cities. If you are looking to buy houses for $100,000 to $240,000 that will rent for 1% of the purchase price per month, I promise those homes still exist, and I'll tell you where. In the north, we've got Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Slightly southeast of there, check out West Virginia and Kentucky. Across the southern border, look at Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Right in the middle of the U.S., we've got Iowa, Missouri, and Arkansas that have affordable cities. And just to the west of those states are Kansas and Oklahoma, where you can find homes in the $200,000 range. If you really want to find a house in the Atlantic coastal state area that cash flows as a rental property, you could find homes that cash flow in North and South Carolina, but you'll be paying more than $200,000 for those homes. But the rent in the Carolinas can make up for the higher prices because the rents have grown proportionally with the higher purchase prices. Once you've decided on a state, look at places that are within 30 minutes of well-known cities. This doesn't always mean the largest cities, but cities that have at least a medium-sized hospital and a university and manufacturing. Maybe an Amazon warehouse or a government entity, somewhere that employs over 1,000 people. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Next, use the 1% rule as the next filter. That means finding an area where the average monthly rent is at least 1% of the purchase price. Some investors look at Gross Rent Multiplier instead. It doesn't matter. There are 2 ways of looking at the same numbers. With the Gross Rent Multiplier method, you divide the price of a house by the amount of the gross rent that you'd collect for that house over the course of a year. In my research, I found that a property is more likely to cash flow if this number is 8 or less, and the lower the better. As an example, if you're looking in an area where you can buy a house for $200,000, it needs to rent for $2,000 a month. Or if a house could be purchased for $130,000, make sure that you could rent it for at least $1,300 a month. Or if you buy a condo for $350,000, would it rent for $3,500 a month? These examples meet the 1% rule. If you're looking at a duplex or a fourplex, use the numbers for all of the units combined. You can find this data on your favorite real estate home search sites where you look at homes to purchase. Pull up a search for homes for rent, and in the browser tab next to that, pull up homes for sale in the same area. Look at the areas around the city where the monthly rent looks to be around 1% of the sales price of similar homes in that same specific area. If that's a green light, we go to the next filter on my list. The next filter is property taxes. Look up what an investor pays annually for property taxes of that city and county and state. Many times, this could be different than what someone pays who owns it and lives there as their primary residence. Many cities in the Midwest and southern states have property taxes on long-term rental properties that are 1 to 2% of the assessed value per year. Find out if the rate is different for out-of-town investors. This affects your cash-on-cash return. And if your goal for investing is cash flow, this is very important, so don't skip this step. I am one of those investors who buys houses for the cash flow and the tax deductions. Some investors buy houses only for the tax deductions. Some investors buy rental properties solely based on high appreciation and equity, and they don't care if it cash flows. From what I found, it's hard to find an area that has both. So the decision of where to invest is different for each investor, depending on what they need right now and what their 10-year and 30-year plan is for the properties. Let's discuss equity appreciation. What factors influence the appreciation of a value of a house? Simple. It's supply and demand. Has there been a steady increase in the population for the last 3 years? Is this a hot market that people are moving to, but the prices could still be affordable now? Why would people move to that city in the years ahead? Is there a university, hospital, or manufacturing facility that's growing, or a government entity that employs a large number of workers? This is important because people stay in a town where they can get a good job, and they leave towns to find better jobs. This affects rental demand, which affects your income as the owner of the rental property. The more rental demand, the less likely your property will sit on the market vacant, which costs you profit. So look for cities where unemployment rate is 5% or less, and there is an indication that jobs will continue to grow. The other reason people might move to a city or stay in a city is the affordable housing. People will have to leave cities where they can't afford to live. So look for a city where it's easy for someone to find a job where their annual income is 40 times their monthly rent amount. Another way to say this is their monthly income is 3 times their rent amount. So for example, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the median rent is around $1,000 a month. You can easily find houses that are $1,000 a month in rent. And that would mean that ideally, the income for Fort Wayne would be at least $40,000 a year. And the median income is much more than that in Fort Wayne. So this is an example of an affordable city for renters and for investors to buy houses. After the affordability filter, the next filter to look at is you want to find out what the local landlord-tenant laws are for that city and county and state, and if they are enforced for both landlords and tenants. You can join groups in person or on Facebook where investors gather and share their experiences. When I buy a property in a city, or if I'm deciding if I should sell a property in a city, one of the things I consider is if local laws and judges are fair to both landlords and tenants. It's great to be in a place where laws are fair and enforced. I call City Hall to ask about any likely changes in local laws and recent changes that I need to know about. By doing this, I have crossed cities off the list of places that I was considering buying, and I sold a couple properties too, based on my experiences with this issue. Why is this important? Because if a local government doesn't enforce lease agreements and laws, there's a good chance you're going to lose money at some point. If a city has passed all of these filters so far, if the boxes are getting checked, you like the city, then look up data for schools and crime on public websites and then compare it to other cities that you're considering. Licensed real estate agents follow fair housing guidelines, so they aren't allowed to tell you if they think an area is good or bad, but you are allowed to research this yourself, and you'll find information on popular data sharing websites. I'm going to put some of these websites in my next Paths to Fortune newsletter, so you can research it yourself. There's quite a difference within the same city, so be thorough. Don't assume that because crime or schools is great in one area of a city that it's great everywhere. Doing this will help you filter down areas further to the right zip code for buying. And from there, finding a house becomes much easier. Then you can find a house and make an offer with the terms and conditions that make sense for you. As you can tell from this filtering process, I don't just throw a dart in a map and hope for the best. And I don't just rely on what someone tells me either. This is my exact research process, and it's been successful. Once I've checked all these boxes for a zip code within a city, I start looking for specific deals. And I'll tell you that process on a future episode. All right, now that you know the process, let's look at 5 example cities based on all this research. I'll tell you some good things about the 5 cities and some things that aren't so good. I'm not telling you to invest in any of these places. I'm just giving you an example of how to apply the concepts here, and you can decide if any of these cities might be good for accomplishing your long-term investing goals. So why did I choose these 5 cities? Because I looked at specific houses in these cities using the process that I described, and I found rental houses that have the potential for a profitable cash-on-cash return, even if you get a loan at an 8% interest rate. The cap rate on the houses that I looked at in these cities was 7% or better, and the gross rent multiplier was a 7 or less. So here you go. Here's my 5 to look at today. The first of the 5 is Danville, Illinois. Why? Because it's affordable for renters and home buyers. Over half the population own their homes, but a large portion rent. And you can buy a 3-bedroom house for $80,000 that rents for $800 a month. The research I did about the town looked pretty good all around. The only downside to this city compared to the other 4 that I'll name here is the higher property taxes, which affects cash flow. I think this is one of the reasons why Illinois did not show up on my list of the most affordable states. The next city of the 5 is Terre Haute, Indiana. I love investing in Indiana, and this city is one of the best places according to my research. I subscribed to several realtors' email lists for properties in Indiana, and the deals that I get emailed to me from Terre Haute have looked great on paper. I got 2 today that look phenomenal, and I'm going to research them further. The only thing that isn't as good about this city compared to other cities that I'll mention today is that most of the houses are owned by real estate investors. There is a university here, which means lots of renters, and that's fine if the investor property owners have the belief that they should constantly maintain and improve their properties. Not every real estate investor actively tries to improve the condition of their properties, though. So for any city, you should try to buy a house on a street where it looks like the houses around it have been maintained well, either by someone who lives there and owns it themselves, or by an investor that owns it but maintains it. Now, looking at the appreciation data for Terre Haute, Indiana, this has not been a problem for property values. But I'm mentioning it because it's just generally a good thing to keep in mind and pay attention to. And even though there was a solid appreciation in recent years, past performance does not guarantee future performance and financial success. It is one piece of the puzzle, and all the pieces of a puzzle need to fit to see the full picture. So I still think that Terre Haute, Indiana is a great city for you to watch and research further. Number 3 on today's list is Macon, Georgia. Now, Georgia and Illinois don't usually show up on the affordable states list because they have some pretty big cities that have some expensive areas in those cities. Atlanta, Georgia, and Chicago, Illinois are very expensive. They have some very expensive areas. But if you love Georgia and Illinois, there are smaller towns where you can find affordable houses. And one of those is Macon, Georgia. There are 4 colleges in Macon, which again brings in many renters to occupy rental properties. There's a steady job market there too. This is a town that is an affordable place to buy or rent, and the taxes are reasonable. And the Georgia taxes, from what I researched, seem to look better than the Illinois taxes. Next is Shreveport, Louisiana. This was a surprising one that I found. Surprising because I have not heard a lot of people talking about it in the investor circles that I run in. But it was one of the best markets that I researched for investors if you're comparing the higher rental average is to the average cost of purchasing a house. And the property taxes are low. The recent economic data for the city looks good, with low unemployment and an increase in jobs. So while it's kind of been flying below the radar and not many people have been talking about it, it's one to look at. I hear a lot of investors talking about the bigger cities like Birmingham, Alabama, and Montgomery, and some of the smaller to mid-sized cities kind of get overlooked. But that can be good because it means less competition with other buyers. For cash flow purposes, the city that I found out of all of the 5 that I've mentioned today is Detroit, Michigan. And here's why. I found houses online that look like they could get a 10% cap rate and have a gross rent multiplier of 5. This is really good compared to other cities. Detroit has a high demand for rental homes, and the home prices are affordable to buy. The only downside about buying in Detroit is that some areas are still struggling with crime, which can affect your vacancy rates, and your expenses could be high due to property damage. But the good news is, the city of Detroit has this online map showing where crimes were reported recently, and that will help you learn about different areas. If you're wondering what areas I have invested in for long-term rental properties, my choices have been Indiana and Kentucky, and my favorite of those is Indiana. And those are for the reasons that I've mentioned in this episode. In future episodes, I'll share with you the apps and websites that I use to find the right property within a city or zip code. Before you invest your money anywhere, always run the numbers. Go through the filters we've talked about today and talk to local investors in that area. Research, research, research. Analyze cash-on-cash return, cap rates, and gross rent multipliers before you make an offer. I love making spreadsheets because numbers tell a story and give us direction. So I suggest you make a spreadsheet for cities and zip codes that you're interested in. Use the information from this podcast to make a checklist or a spreadsheet of your filters and to filter all the cities that you're interested in down to just a few that would work best for your goals, and then find the areas, neighborhoods, zip codes within those cities. If you want more information about what I talked about today, sign up for the Paths to Fortunes newsletter on pathstofortunes.com. I'll send you notes from this podcast, including the websites I use to research cities and what my spreadsheet looks like. In summary, real estate investing isn't just about picking the right area. It's about making smart, informed decisions that fit in your long-term financial plan. Stay consistent, stay focused, stay educated, and keep taking the next right step on your path to fortune. I'm happy that I get to help you get the information that you need to take the next steps on your path. Next time on Paths to Fortunes, we're going to be breaking down one of the biggest money misunderstandings, what you think you make versus what you actually keep. We'll dive into the various types of income that the wealthy use to build true financial freedom, and then I'll tell you how to explain it to your kids so that you can have helpful money talks as a family. If you want an easy-to-understand perspective on the many ways money can come in, you won't want to miss this podcast on other income sources. There are many paths to fortunes. Thank you so much for joining me today. This podcast is all about creating real wealth for real people like you. I promise that in every episode, I will share specific actionable steps like I did today to help your family get one step closer to Financial Freedom Day, the day that you work because you want to, not because you have to. So hit the subscribe button if that sounds good to you. I'm Heidi Four. I'm a real estate investor, business coach, and a financial coach. Thank you for letting me come along beside you on your paths to fortunes. Now for the legal disclaimer. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing in this episode should be considered financial, legal, or tax advice. Investing always involves risks, and there are no guaranteed returns. You could lose money. Always consult a licensed attorney, CPA, real estate professional, and financial advisor before making investment decisions. The information shared is for general education only and is not personalized investment advice. The cities listed in this podcast are used as examples of how to research and not a guarantee of future performance. I hope you found this episode informative and interesting, and I'll see you next time on Paths to Fortunes.